I talked myself out of my daughter's respect. That's a hard thing to admit at 70 years old, but it's the truth. For years, I thought being a good parent meant staying involved, offering advice, sharing my opinions, helping them see things from my perspective, especially now that I had all this life experience to draw from. So I talked. A lot. I gave my opinion on how they were raising their kids. I offered suggestions about their finances. I shared my concerns about their marriage, their career choices, their health habits. I explained why things were better in my day. I reminded them of lessons I'd taught them when they were young. And with every word, every piece of unsolicited wisdom, every story that started with, "When I was your age," I watched their respect for me drain away. It happened so gradually I didn't even notice at first. The way they started cutting phone calls short. The way their eyes would glaze over when I started talking. The way they stopped asking for my input and started just telling me decisions they'd already made. Then, one day, my son said something that stopped me cold. "Dad, I've got to go. But thanks for, yeah, I'll think about it." He wasn't going to think about it. We both knew that. He was just trying to get off the phone. That's when I realized I'd become that parent. The one they tolerate instead of respect. The one they avoid instead of seek out. And it happened because I never learned the most important lesson about maintaining respect as you get older. Silence is power. Here's what nobody tells you about getting older. When your children are young, they need your words. They need your guidance, your instruction, your constant input. Being a good parent means talking, teaching, correcting, explaining. And we get so good at that role. We spend decades being the authority, the one with the answers, the voice of reason in their lives. But then something shifts. They grow up. They become adults with their own lives, their own experiences, their own ways of doing things. And we're supposed to shift too. We're supposed to step back, let go, transition from authority to advisor, from teacher to supporter. But most of us don't make that transition. We keep talking. We keep offering opinions they didn't ask for. We keep trying to parent adults the way we parented children. And our children don't tell us directly that it's not working anymore. They're too polite for that, or maybe they feel too guilty. Instead, they just start tuning us out. They start seeing us as out of touch, annoying, the naggy parent who doesn't know when to stop. I see it all the time. Friends my age who complain that their kids never call, never visit, never ask for advice anymore. And when I listen to them talk, I understand why. They're exhausting. Every conversation is a lecture. Every interaction is an opportunity to correct, advise, remind, or warn. There's no space for their children to just be adults around them. And the tragic part? They think they're being good parents. They think their constant input shows love and care. But what it actually shows is a lack of trust, a lack of respect for their children's autonomy, and an inability to let go of control. Let me tell you what happened when I finally learned to be quiet. About a year ago, my daughter called me. She was stressed about a decision at work. In the old days, I would have jumped right in with my thoughts. I would have told her what I would do, shared a story from my own career, given her a step-by-step plan. But this time, I just listened. I said, and "I see," and that does sound stressful. And when she finished explaining the situation, I waited. Just a few seconds of silence. And then she said something she hadn't said to me in years. "So, Dad, what do you think I should do?" she asked. She actually asked for my opinion instead of having it forced on her. That moment taught me everything I needed to know about respect and restraint. Here's what I've learned about saying less and gaining more respect. First, your children already know what you're going to say. Think about that for a second. After decades of being their parent, after years of sharing your opinions, your children can predict exactly what you're going to say about any given situation. You don't like their spending habits? They know. You think they work too much? They know. You wish they'd raise their kids differently? They know. You're worried about their health, their marriage, their choices? They know, they know, they know. Saying it again doesn't make them suddenly see the light. It just makes you predictable. And people don't respect predictable nagging. My friend Harold hasn't figured this out yet. Every single time he talks to his son, he mentions the son's weight. Every single time. You look like you've gained a few pounds. Are you watching what you eat? Your mother was worried about your health. Does his son not know Harold thinks he's overweight? Of course he knows. Does repeating it help? Not even a little bit. All it does is make his son avoid him. Because why would you seek out someone who makes you feel criticized every time you interact? Second, silence makes your rare words carry more weight. This is the paradox. The less you say, the more impact your words have when you do speak. I learned this from my own father, though I didn't appreciate it until he was gone. My dad was a quiet man. He didn't offer opinions unless you asked. He didn't fill silence with unnecessary words. But when he did speak, everyone listened, because his words were rare enough to matter. I remember exactly 3 pieces of advice he gave me in my entire adult life. 3. And I remember all of them because they stood out. They weren't buried in a constant stream of commentary. Now compare that to parents who never stop talking. Their advice blends together into white noise. Nothing stands out because everything is equally insistent. If you want your children to actually hear you when you have something important to say, you need to stop filling their ears with things that don't matter. Third, restraint signals confidence. When you constantly offer your opinion, you know what you're really communicating? Anxiety, insecurity, a desperate need to still be relevant and needed. Your children can sense that, and it doesn't inspire respect, it inspires pity. Think about the people you respect most in your own life. Are they the ones who constantly tell you what to do? Or are they the ones who trust you to figure things out, who believe in your competence, who only step in when truly necessary? Restraint says, I trust you. I believe you're capable. I don't need to control you to feel valuable. That's what earns respect. I started practicing this with my son about 6 months ago. He was telling me about a conflict with his neighbor over a property line. The old me would have jumped in with legal advice, suggestions for how to handle the conversation, warnings about what could go wrong. The new me just said, "That's frustrating. Sounds like you've got a tricky situation there." And then I shut up. He worked it out on his own. And a few weeks later, when he called to tell me how it resolved, he said something that nearly knocked me over. I appreciate that you didn't try to tell me what to do, Dad. It helped me think it through myself. He appreciated my silence more than he'd ever appreciated my advice. Fourth, your children need space to ask, not space to be told. Here's something I didn't understand for most of my life. People only really hear advice they've asked for. Everything else is just noise, interference, something to politely nod through while waiting for you to finish. But when someone asks for your input, they're actually open to receiving it. Their defenses are down. They're genuinely curious about your perspective. The problem is, if you're always offering your opinion, your children never get the chance to ask. You fill every silence before they can speak. You answer questions they haven't posed. You solve problems they haven't shared. And in doing so, you rob them of the opportunity to seek your wisdom voluntarily. I've started doing something new in my conversations with my kids. When there's a natural pause, I let it sit there. I don't rush to fill it. I don't assume they need my input. And you know what happens? Sometimes they ask. Sometimes they say, "What would you do in this situation?" Or, "Do you think I'm handling this right?" And those conversations are completely different from the ones where I'm forcing my perspective on them. They're engaged, they're listening. They actually consider what I say because they invited me into the conversation. Fifth, saying less protects you from being wrong. Here's an uncomfortable truth. The older you get, the more out of touch you become with your children's reality. You don't understand their work environment. You don't fully grasp their financial pressures. You don't know what it's like to raise kids in today's world. You're operating on outdated information and different generational values, which means a lot of your advice, it's not as relevant as you think it is. And every time you give advice that doesn't work, that doesn't fit their situation, that shows how little you understand their life. You lose credibility. I learned this the hard way when I kept pushing my daughter to handle a work situation the way I would have handled it 30 years ago. She finally snapped and said, "Dad, that's not how it works anymore. Things are different now." She was right, and my insistence on giving advice about something I didn't fully understand made me look foolish, not wise. Now when my kids talk about their work or their world, I ask questions instead of offering answers. I try to understand instead of assuming I already do. And paradoxically, that curiosity earns me more respect than my outdated expertise ever did. Sixth, silence creates space for relationship instead of just advice. This might be the most important thing I've learned. When every conversation is you talking at your children, advising, correcting, suggesting, warning, there's no room for actual connection. There's no room for them to share their lives with you as equals. No room for humor, for vulnerability, for the kind of adult friendship that could replace the parent-child dynamic. Since I've learned to talk less, my conversations with my kids have changed completely. We laugh more. They share things with me they never used to share because they know I'm not going to turn it into a teaching moment. They call me not because they need something, but because they actually enjoy talking to me. That's worth more than any amount of being right or feeling needed as an advice giver. And finally, restraint is the ultimate act of respect toward them. When you constantly offer unsolicited advice, you're implying your children aren't smart enough to figure things out on their own. You're saying, "I don't trust your judgment. I don't believe you're capable without my input. You still need me to manage your life." That's not respect. That's control disguised as love. True respect means trusting them to make their own decisions, their own mistakes, their own way forward. Even when you disagree, even when you think you know better, it means believing they're adults who deserve the same autonomy you expect for yourself. I had to ask myself a hard question. Do I want to be right, or do I want to have a relationship? Because I can't have both. I can either be the parent who always has an opinion, who always needs to correct and guide and advise, or I can be the parent they actually want to spend time with. I chose the relationship, and it required me to close my mouth and open my ears. I'm not going to lie to you. Learning to say less has been one of the hardest things I've done, because for so long, my value as a parent was tied to what I could teach, what I could offer, what I knew. Staying silent felt like becoming invisible, like admitting I had nothing left to contribute. But that was my ego talking, my fear of irrelevance. The truth is, I have more to offer my children now than I ever did, not because of what I say, but because of who I've become. Someone who trusts them, someone who listens, someone who doesn't need to control them to feel valuable. There are still moments when I slip, when I catch myself about to launch into a lecture or offer advice nobody asked for. Old habits die hard, but I'm getting better, and the reward is immediate. My relationships with my children have never been better, not because I'm saying smarter things or giving better advice, but because I'm saying less and listening more. They respect me now in a way they didn't before, not as the all-knowing parent who has to weigh in on everything, but as someone who trusts them enough to let them live their own lives. And that respect, it's genuine. It's not the obligatory respect you give someone out of duty. It's the real respect you give someone you actually admire. That's what I wanted all along. I just had to stop talking long enough to let it happen. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you talk to your children, try an experiment. Listen twice as much as you speak. Don't offer advice unless they specifically ask for it. Don't fill every silence with your opinion. Just be present. Just be interested in their lives without needing to manage them. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first. You're going to have to bite your tongue. You're going to have moments where you're dying to jump in with your perspective. Don't. Just wait. See what happens when you give them space to be adults around you. I think you'll be surprised at how much more they share when they're not bracing for a lecture. How much more they seek your opinion when it's not constantly forced on them. Your words have power, but only if you use them sparingly. If this message resonated with you, share it with another parent who might need to hear it. And subscribe if you want more honest conversations about what it really means to age with dignity and wisdom. At 70, I've learned that sometimes the wisest thing you can say is nothing at all. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, silence is not absence, it's presence with restraint.